When someone is speaking to us, as you are listening to me now, how much are we simply listening to what they're saying and trying to understand it? And how much are we filtering what they're saying through what is going on in our lives, through what we might be working through at this time? If we feel, for example, that we've let this person down, do we hear criticism of what they're saying, even if that is not intended at all? If we're struggling with something in our own lives, do we look for insights in how to respond to that from what is being said, even if the speaker's focus is very different? I was challenged by this question when reading this morning in Matthew 16, where, among other things, there's a story of Jesus and his followers on a boat, with his followers, not for the first time, totally misunderstanding what Jesus was saying. He warns them in Matthew 16, verse 6, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." They were very much aware that they hadn't brought any bread with them to eat, and so they started arguing among themselves about that, and with Jesus speaking about yeast, reminding them of bread. Jesus gets involved in that conversation and points out that providing food is not the issue. After all, he had done so miraculously for 4,000, for 5,000 people or more, and his followers were aware of that. They were part of that. That's not the problem. That's not what he meant. So he warns them again, and they grasp that he was not talking about yeast in the context of bread, but using it to speak about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious leaders of the day. And I think this raises some interesting and maybe challenging questions for us. When we are reading the Bible, when we are listening to what God is saying to us, how much are we focused on the situations we are in at that moment and assuming that what God is saying relates to that? Please don't get me wrong. The Bible, God, can have a lot to say about what is going on in our lives and can provide much needed guidance and direction. But is there a danger that sometimes we engage with the Bible and with God purely from our own perspective, seeking answers to what is going on in our lives, to what we are thinking about, to maybe things that we feel guilty about or are struggling with? And we might miss the fact that God might be wanting to tell us something totally different about what is important to him, to give us some of his perspective. Similarly, when we're talking with others, do we really listen to what they are saying and try to understand their perspective and where they are coming from? Or are we relating what they are saying to maybe what we think their motives are, particularly if we know we have let them down? And then we don't allow ourselves to hear what they actually want to say to us without any preconceived ideas or filters. So here's a challenge. When you're reading the Bible today, and I hope you do, when you're listening to God today, and I pray you will, when you're listening to somebody else, it's great to have conversations with people. Let's really try to understand what they are saying and want to communicate without assuming that we already know. And just to avoid any misunderstanding, I'm not trying to get on at anyone in saying this, just sharing something with you that I was challenged over this morning.